Hello and welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rayn and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. To get artist directories with maps inside them, go to your local library or go to the website svos.org. Our guest is Amanda Krauss, locally known as the Avian Artist. She exhibits her art locally and internationally at art festivals and juried art exhibits across the country. And she has very colorful avian artwork. So welcome, Amanda.
Great, thank you, Sally.
So tell us a little bit about what Avian Artist means. What is your background?
Well, Avian Artist is the art of birds, or the bird art for the title of the show. And thanks to my third grade teacher, she took us on a birding tour at Audubon Canyon Ranch, and oh gosh, that was some time ago. And it just got me on this love of birds. And then also thanks to my parents, who were both art teachers, I was always immersed in art my entire life. And so I combined my love of birds into my art at a very young age.
So you paint very realistic birds. Did you study in school? Did you study birds as well?
I did. I went to University of California, Davis, and I studied avian science along with art studio, and it was a great opportunity.
So you're both a scientist and an artist.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about avian sciences. What does that encompass?
Well, avian sciences means you can either study wild birds, poultry, cage birds like parrots. You can pick a science to study. So I went with wild birds after trying a little bit of each. I took some poultry classes, cage birds, and found that wild birds are just so amazing, just like back in third grade.
So you also must be a bird watcher then.
Oh yes, I go out and every day on my lunch break, because you can see birds everywhere. That's the best thing about bird watching. You can travel the world, you can go into the city, you can go out in the country and just see birds everywhere.
So where are some of your favorite spots in the area for bird watching?
Oh, I always like the baylands because you've got shorebirds, you've got ducks sometimes, sea ducks, and then you've got trees if you're lucky, so you get things like egrets and herons and little songbirds.
So you like the baylands the best?
Yeah,
Excellent.
Palo Alto Baylands is wonderful.
Very
If
cool.
you haven't been there before, you should go. And they have a lot of wonderful little guided nature hikes.
Oh, excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
So you must be an expert at identifying the birds then.
Well, I've practiced a lot.
Yeah.
I'm always learning because there's always elusive birds, so birds that hide a lot that you can't see very well.
Oh.
So there's always that moment where you get a special bird or a rare bird.
So to combine that with the artist, do you mostly take photographs when you're out there, or how do you record your bird watching for your art?
So I'm in the field and I do a lot of binocular use. I use my binoculars, I spot a bird, and if I'm really lucky, then I can get my camera out and take a photo. But most of the time, I take little sketches in my notebook and I get the posture of the bird and maybe some of the surrounding plant life or what's going on. And I kind of have a memory of the bird and what was my favorite little instant that I caught a glimpse of him, because sometimes they're very hard to find.
Right, yes, and I know from experience taking photographs of birds is next to impossible because they move so quickly.
Yes.
So, excellent. So you brought some beautiful large paintings into the studio today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about a couple of these?
Thank you. So this red-tailed hawk here in the back was a commissioned piece for someone who wanted a hawk. And I had been out at the California Academy of Sciences on their new living roof, and all of a sudden this wonderful red-tailed hawk flew over me, and I got the camera out and worked with the continuous photos and got a wonderful picture.
Oh, excellent.
That I was able to reference from.
So tell us a little bit about your collaging style. How do you work with that? What's that like?
So I studied both, or I should say, printmaking drawing and painting while in school. And so I combine those 3 techniques into my work. And so with the background here, the blues and the greens, these were different types of tissues paper that were overlaid. And when you overlay them, they turn into a third color sometimes.
Yes. Excellent. And then the one that's behind me is a smaller bird. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so this is a little bird that on a trip to Alaska that we saw. And they live in these little rushes, and they're very difficult to see.
So yeah, tell us a little bit of why you did the background the way it is.
You can see over here that there are some reeds, some realistic reeds, but I kind of blurred the background with these interesting pictures and shapes, and also the notes to represent the song of the bird.
I like that.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
thank
very
you.
clever.
And then some various textures. You can see there's polka dots and stripes, and I'm mimicking nature with some more abstracted forms, because my paintings are about the birds.
Yes, clearly. So you also brought some images that we can take a look at, so one of a different painting. So let's take a look at those now and see what those are. So you have some very realistic birds.
Yes, yes. I wanted to show the red-tailed hawk photograph that I got, that I worked from, since it's difficult to get a good photo, and I think that's my first and only good photo of a bird right now. Since
Very nice.
I like to draw and paint them, I'm better at sketching them in my notebook than taking a photograph.
And the next one?
In my winter wren, I wanted to show everyone the layering that I do. And if you remember the polka dots and the stripes, you can see these are the underneath layers with some gesso, with some color, some collage, some map designs, and then you can see how I shaped out the wren on the canvas before I painted them in.
So you do the background first and then paint the bird,
Right,
generally?
so I kind of work, I guess you could say, backwards to front. So I start with the layers that are underneath, because if I paint something transparent over, it'll show the colors, and so I like to combine those layers.
That was very nice. So let's see a completed one now. What's the next one?
Yeah, so this American robin was a special bird. One year I participated in the Christmas bird count, and this one year there was like 6,000 robins spotted by my birding team alone.
Wow.
And so we nicknamed it the Year of the Robin, and so that new year I went out and painted an American robin. And you can see some of the collage in the background with the text and the highlighted words.
So very nice. So the Christmas bird count.
Yes.
That sounds interesting.
Yes. And this Anna's hummingbird is special. It used to sit outside my window back home on a little snag, that little stick, over some water. So I've mimicked this little bit of water with these ripples and some collage, but I really wanted to capture his little cute puffy shape when he would sit on the branch.
Yeah, they don't look like that when they're flying. When they're
No.
sitting, though, they've puffed out all the feathers. That looks really cool.
Yeah. And this great egret, I was playing with the mountains and the moon. It was a topic of the day. And so we have the moon with some collage. If you notice in the top left corner, there's this kind of pattern, and that's from some transparent rice paper. And I'm going to demonstrate some of that later today.
Cool.
And this
Look
raven.
at that. That has a lot of detail in
Yes.
it. Very nice.
Thank you. This piece was a lot of work. It started with about at least 10 different layers of papers and paint behind the bird before I could figure out a balanced composition. I played again with some handmade papers, textiles. There's, I believe, some Buddhist prayers inside of it. And then I drew on top of it some of the interesting details behind the bird.
Very nice.
The Bullock's oriole is a beautiful bird. And this time I use more collage and interesting shapes to mimic some of the greenery, shrubbery behind the bird. He's a very beautiful bird that shows up in our area.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the color choices in the background. The greens for the greenery, but do you have a color palette that you work with when you're painting or collaging?
I do work with a color palette. I try to limit my palette sometimes, so it makes me have more interesting choices, especially here in this green heron. You can see it was not as limited because the bird was a little more colorful, and I wanted to have him hide a little more inside the background. So the background matches his body a little more.
Yeah, and green herons are very difficult to see in the wild. I've seen a few of them along the riverbanks.
Yeah, they're quite small.
Very nice.
Thank
so those
you.
are some of your more realistic
Yes.
paintings. Excellent. So you have some things to share with us today.
Yes.
A collage that you'll be working with. So tell us a little bit about your materials and the tools that you use first.
Right, so this pink background here is my gesso that I've put some red paint into, and I wanted to highlight, instead of working from that white canvas that everyone's afraid of, I've decided to start putting paint colors inside of it to highlight it. I've collaged some materials on, like some text, some tissue paper. I've drawn some different shapes, and I've done some printmaking techniques. I think you mentioned I use different techniques.
So what kind of print making?
Yeah, so I work a lot with found objects. So the polka dot-like shapes, the red was created by putting my acrylic paint on bubble wrap.
Oh, nice. Another way to play with bubble wrap.
Yep. Another great one is corrugated cardboard. It makes these wonderful even lines.
So you paint the actual surface of the object and then press it onto your board?
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
very nice.
A little harder to do when you're working on canvas. So when you're working on paper or board, the printmaking techniques work a lot better because you're putting pressure on the object. So I've sketched out a bird shape, which is a little hard to see sometimes, but when you're working, you just kind of give yourself an idea of what you're working with.
Right, so what bird is this going to be?
This, I was thinking, was going to be a red-shouldered blackbird.
Aha, pretty.
That was a good one. So I've brought different papers in to test, and I wanted to show you how some of the paper becomes transparent, and when you overlay them, you can see underneath.
So what are you brushing on?
Oh yes, I should mention that this is gloss medium, and this is basically clear acrylic is the easiest way to describe what I'm working with. And so I just lay a nice thick layer down. You also want to put a nice layer on the back of the paper so that when they dry, they adhere together. So for instance, I'm just going to outline the branch right now that he's on, just to give me a little bit of definition.
Oh, I can see it's becoming transparent. You can see the pink sort of mauve color.
So I'll just show you real quick. So once I put the medium on, you can see the pink showing through. Okay, so I'm going to overlay that with another paper just so you get an idea of what it looks like. Again, put a little on the back. And it's okay if it gets anywhere on your paper or your canvas because you're just going to be working with the clear acrylic or another medium on top of it.
Right, and so then the medium, it's what you could also mix with paint to thin the color, right?
Right.
So it's more of a painting medium, it's not the varnish at the end, right?
Right. So you can add the same medium to any color and make it transparent, in theory. All right, so I'm going to take, this is some tissue paper, and tissue paper does some wonderful things, and I'm going to overlay over a larger area. I use tissue paper a lot.
So what does it do? What are you trying for?
It becomes very transparent, and it just creates another texture. So when I prop it up here, hopefully you can see the outline of the bird underneath it still. And I can paint over that and have a really wonderful texture that I couldn't get from as if my brush was straight on the canvas.
Excellent. So why don't you show us a few more pieces on there? Let's see what it's going to look like.
All right. I like to repeat my designs a little bit.
Well, I can see that you have circles and bubble wrap, and now you have paper that has circles.
Right.
Very nice.
Yeah, that's all in my composition. I like to think about composition, even though it might look a little haphazard in the beginning.
But you have a plan before you start? Do you pick out the pieces of paper before you even begin the painting?
Sometimes. usually what I'll gather up a few items of scraps or things that are laying around, a few leftover paint samples, and I will put them on the canvas. And usually those are the types of things that will lead me in the direction of maybe what bird it's going to be. Now, occasionally I'll know what I want to paint. Like I mentioned with the robin, and I saw
Right.
6,000 robins,
Wow.
which is pretty neat. But most of the time, I'll have an idea, or I'll have a lot of surfaces painted or prepared, and then when I come to the studio, I know what bird I can put onto what surface that I've prepared.
So you have several of these collage pieces ready to go?
Yes, yes, I'm always working on about 10 surfaces at once.
Oh, wow. Lots
Yeah,
and lots.
yeah. So
You must
I
have a
can-
nice studio space.
Messy studio space. When you have a lot of projects, it gets pretty messy. But I use a variety of same materials sometimes and do a series of paintings. So they'll have some similarities or possibly some collage materials. But with the layering of the paint on top of it, or the drawing or other printmaking techniques, they can look totally different.
Right. So where do you find your materials, all the tissue papers and text and musical notes and things
Right.
like that?
You know, estate sales, garage sales, rummage sales.
Really?
There you can find very interesting old papers that you can't find now. Also, tissue paper when you get a gift. I save that
Well,
tissue
yeah.
paper. And then I'm always looking at art stores. There's specialty paper stores that you can go to where they just have handmade papers, papers imported from Japan, Japanese papers. This is like a fiber paper that's pretty interesting. It's a little hard to see, but you might be able to see some of the fibers that show up when you collage in different pieces. So sometimes it's accidental, or you just don't know what's going to happen until
Right.
you've put the medium on top to know what's going to happen, and it's a surprise.
Right. So then you let each layer dry. How many layers in a painting would you say in general?
Oh gosh, in general, I would say maybe 10. I mean, you start with, you've got a gesso layer, and I typically do 2 layers of gesso. And then on top of it, I will do some collage. And then on top of that, usually some drawing or printmaking. And then I repeat those couple steps all over and over until I get a finished product. And yes, I let each layer dry, and when you have nice warm weather, it can dry in a few hours, enough for you to work on. But most of the time, it takes a day.
Right.
Yeah,
Hence working on more than one
exactly.
at a
That's
time.
why it's very useful to work on more than one at a time. So I can let one dry and go to the next one.
Well, excellent. So you have brought some more images. So we've gone through very realistic looking
Yes.
birds, but you also have a more whimsical side. So why don't we take a look at some of those images and tell us a little bit about why whimsical when you're
Great.
such a scientist yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes you get tired of drawings, very realistic, making all these very detailed lines. So I take the techniques that I use in my large paintings and do these outlines of birds. It's a little hard to explain, but the bird shape, the robin in this one, is actually the background. And I've taken the blue paint and painted around him. So my last layers are the blue paint with the details on top of these whimsical flowers. These are very free-flowing. I don't know what I'm going to get. I'm experimenting with shapes and colors. But it's really, again, in these paintings about the shape of the bird. So they are
Right. So that
typically
looks like the robin that you did before. Is very
very similar.
realistic shape
Yeah.
of the bird. Looks to me it's not just a made-up bird.
Right,
Very
yeah.
nice. So the next
And the
one.
next one is a Steller's jay, which is pretty common in the area I live in, the redwoods. And so we see a lot of these little guys. And you see I've repeated this leaf shape, and I've cut out tissue paper and text paper to add very interesting shapes to the leaves. Again, the bird is more important to me, but
So
nature
what
is...
made you choose the yellow with the blue background when the bird itself is blue, right?
Right, right. So actually, again, this is where the background was yellow, and I decided to paint a Steller's jay, And so what represents Stellar's Day? Well, blue is a wonderful color to use. And I've used this light blue and pink for a horizon line kind of sunset feel. These beautiful sunsets.
Very nice.
Song sparrow is one that you can see in the baylands. I mentioned the baylands earlier. And I've mimicked some of the plant life that he was singing on and given a great name. These birds are great singers. The western bluebird is a beautiful bird, and you can see again the background on this one was the blue, and the last layer I painted was this red, because I don't know if you're familiar, they have a wonderfully red, bright red chest.
Well, look at that. Yeah, I like the way that the background and the foreground sort of interchange, but it's clear where the bird is.
Right. The last one, the red one, it was still transparent, and that's what caused it. So in this one on the top, you can see this little shape of kind of elongated polka dots. That's another wonderful tissue paper that I've collaged on top of the blue paint. The California towhee is a wonderful ground bird. He's always scratching in the dirt. Lots of exuberant movement, and that's why that great leafy shape in his body came from.
Very
and the
nice.
next one. Oh,
That's it?
I guess that was it.
Excellent. So the whimsical birds that you've come up with, you told me that you were part of a very interesting show called the 50/50 show, where you did 50 paintings in 50 days. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how it was juried?
Okay, yeah, so the 50/50 show was a juried show, which basically means there's a judge that looks at the entrance. So I submitted artwork, and the judge picked me to be part of the show. I believe there was around 70 artists, and this was based in Pacifica. And each artist was given 50 pieces of wood to work on. So there was about 70 artists, 50 pieces each. You know,
Wow.
you do the math of how many there
That's
was
a lot.
there. It was a lot. And so each of us had a theme to our exhibit. And so, of course, I picked my birds. And I mostly did these little whimsical layers, but maybe that's where my whimsical work really started coming from, because I had to work to simplify down my work.
Right.
Because you think about the realistic birds and all the fine details and the feathers, I was able to be a lot freer with the 50/50 pieces. So what I did every day, I went out pretty much at my lunch break or maybe before work and did some bird watching locally. So my backyard, in Los Altos where I work, or in the redwoods. Occasionally I did go to Half Moon Bay, to the ocean.
Nice.
And I got some great birds. So I picked my favorite bird from each day, and I worked on my layering in my background, getting different paint colors down and collage down, and then getting my bird shapes on my board, and then finishing all the details.
Wow. But you couldn't finish an entire painting in one day because you
No.
need to let it dry, so you had to like stretch it out and do
Yes.
several at the same time. Wow.
So I came up with
That's
a
a
system.
lot of work.
Yeah, I worked on about 7 pieces at the same time. So I guess you could say I did 7 in 7 days, but I collaged all the backgrounds at the same time. So
Right.
in one day they would all dry, and the next day added the details. And then each day I'd finish one, and so I'd be thinking, oh, what bird am I going to see tomorrow, and what bird will go on this board? And then I would add my bird to the one board and continue to work on the other ones.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So these little ones that are in front of the table here are examples of some of the paintings that you did.
Yeah, so you
those
can
are
see they're small pieces.
10%.
Yeah, yeah, 10%, 5 of 50. You can see these small pieces. They're about 6 by 6, and there's a lot of detail that goes into
Oh,
them.
yeah. Well, it's not easier to do a smaller painting than it is to do a larger painting, I don't think.
No, that's a very good point, actually. Sometimes my small pieces seem to take me more time because I have to figure out what do I leave out.
Right.
How do I draw this texture or a feather? When it's very large, it's easy because you can make it much larger and add extra details. But the small pieces are hard. You have to edit yourself.
Definitely. So in addition to like juried shows in the area, you are also one of the board members for Silicon Valley Open Studios. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it means to be on the board and what some of your responsibilities are?
Yeah, I joined Silicon Valley Open Studios about a year and a half ago, and I was a general member, and just last year put in charge of the art drawing. The board is responsible for the production of the event, and working with Mel has been wonderful, and everyone else. They know what they're doing, and it's very easy to get things done.
So you're in charge of the art drawing. What does that entail?
The art drawing is something we came up with to kind of get visitors to different locations, different artists. An artist donates a piece of art, and we feature it in the catalog, and we allow people to visit that site, sign up to win the art, basically.
Ah, so you can enter to, it's like a drawing that's
Yes.
free. You don't have to, it's not like a donation drawing. You don't buy any tickets. You
Right.
just
It is
sign
free.
up?
You sign
Excellent.
up, and you can win an original piece of artwork.
From one of the SVOS
Participants,
artists.
yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
And so that's in the artist directory where all the artists are in the maps. That's
Correct.
one of the pages they'll show
Yes,
people
that is
where
one of the
that
pages,
is.
and it includes the drawing form and the locations you can drop it off at.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
you can go and see the actual art piece, decide. Excellent. So very
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
So you have so many wonderful birds in your paintings. I'm just wondering if you have an interesting story of bird watching that you have seen, just really briefly.
Oh gosh, I think every single one of my paintings has a story. One that comes to mind was a northern flicker that was out one day when we were at another Christmas bird count, and it just gave us a show where it was around the group for about a minute and a half or so, and I got a
Nice.
very good sketch, and I got him on, I enlarged him again and on a very large canvas.
Very nice.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for being part of Talk Art for this show. I'm very glad to hear you.
Thank you for having me, Sally.
You're welcome. And thank you for watching Talk Art.